here, and we can officially welcome everyone to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. It is our pleasure to share with you our observations and takeaways from last week's Staffing Industry Analysts Executive Forum in Austin, Texas. So you've got me, Susan, and Brad, who were at the Executive Forum last week, trying to attend as many of the different sessions as we could, so we could bring back to you things that we learned. So let us just jump right in. We've got a lot to cover. We'll go through the keynote presentations. We didn't get to all the sessions, but we got to a number of them. So we've got quite a few highlights to share. And then we'll wrap it up with for each of the three of us, some of the lessons and takeaways we have from this year's Executive Forum. All right, so we'll get started with the big presentations, the keynotes, and I get to go first. And it was the state of the industry. Ursula and John took over the reins from Barry Asen this year. They did a fantastic job talking to us about what's going on in the staffing industry now and where the industry is headed based on SIA's research. So they spent a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy. Not a surprise, this has a big impact on everybody in the industry. Uh, Good news is it hasn't really felt this way, but we're seeing positive GDP growth, 2.5% forecast growth this year. So fingers crossed that that will continue going forward for the rest of the year. Inflation, we know we had some really painful rising prices back in 23, kind of that COVID spending hangover. I remember my economics classes, when you dump a lot of money into the economy, it causes inflation. And we dumped, I think, more than $1 trillion into the economy. Well, the good news is it's come back down to the Fed's target rate is 2.0%. So 2.4 is pretty close. So good job, Fed, and helping make money borrowing more stable. Interest rates, though, particularly for housing, remain high, and that's putting a damper on the economy when people can't move and get new homes. That will continue to have an effect, as of course what's happening right now in the Middle East will continue to have effect on the economy for the coming months. Job growth. It's actually been slowing. This is more of a concern. So we saw 3.3 million new jobs created in 2023. Then that was just about halved to go to 1.8 million in 2024. And probably, which everybody on today's webinar knows, 2025 was really slow with only 745,000 new jobs created. So I know that the initial jobs numbers are good, but they keep reforecasting. So who knows what they'll really be. But I will tell you from one of our brands that does recruitment marketing services, they just had a record month, which to me means fingers crossed. Employers are going to be looking at doing more hiring, which will benefit the staffing industry. One of the things that is impacting the industry is job churn. And Ursula and John shared some graphs where they really talked about the fact that less people are changing jobs. Retiring has slowed because people need to continue making money because their costs are up. People are afraid to leave their jobs, so they don't quit. And we don't see the normal level of transition of jobs, which is usually very good for staffing. And when that declines, makes it really rough on our industry. And then, of course, AI. So I really wish we had played a drinking game where every time someone said AI, we had to take a drink. I think we would have been comatose for 3 days. Um, there was a ridiculous number of AI vendors. AI was in every presentation, but I actually liked this one that AI is forecasted to create 170 million new roles by 2030. I'm excited to see that happen because a lot of those roles I think will be very ripe for the staffing industry. So, some implications of all this economic data. I don't know that, again, Brad and Susan, if chime in if you heard something. I didn't hear a great explanation, but this is the first time in SIA's data that the growth in the staffing industry has become disconnected from GDP growth. In other words, the GDP grew more than the staffing industry did last year. And that's concern because you've always been able to count on that if the economy gets better, the staffing industry gets better. And that simply didn't happen. And I didn't take any notes as to the why. Did either one of you catch any notes on that?
David, I did see that there's more statement of work. There's more other things that are falling into other categories than temp help growth. So people are still getting the work done. It's just a slightly different way or different category of how to get the work done, which we'll touch on in a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
know we're going
was
to touch on it because one of the things they looked at was, we think of the staffing industry, temporary help as all contingent employment, but it's actually only a really small fraction of what's considered contingent employment. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Susan, did you have anything else in that?
Yeah, I was going to say Brad and I both had were in sessions with the same message, and we were both touching on it in later slides.
All right, fantastic. So listen up. We'll be talking more about the disconnect in a little bit. All right, the industry still feeling the after effects from the pandemic. So the industry grew at a compound average growth rate of 3.1% from 2010 to 2023. So that is a nice, consistent growth. It's not that shoot up, fall down that we've seen in past recessions and recoveries. It was just almost continual growth for 13 years. But the last 3 years, it has been growth. It certainly hasn't felt like it, particularly if you're in healthcare staffing, which did not see growth. But the last 3 years is only 0.5%. So we're just barely had growth as an industry. And then that growth was limited to certain sectors of the industry where most saw modest declines the past 24 months. The other one that is a piece of data that really bothered me was the penetration rate, which means what percentage of the workforce work in temporary jobs. In 2022, the industry hit its highest ever peak at 2.1% of all jobs were temporary contingent jobs. Um, and then it fell dramatically, although SIA said most of the decline was really because healthcare fell so much that it impacted the overall volume of temporary staffing and that the percent penetration rate in other sectors was not impacted as badly. But we want to see the penetration rate increase. What percentage of all jobs are temporary? And as more work becomes project work, you would expect to see more jobs become either short or long-term contract and temporary jobs. And maybe that's something we can focus on selling to clients in 2026 and beyond. So more of the implications. The total US staffing market, for those who like to see in aggregate, how are we doing, was $178.7 billion last year. Just about 160 of it was temp, 19 of it was search, executive placement. And last year, the industry went down as a whole by 3%. So I remember last year's Executive Forum variation saying that flat is the new up. And I guess the end of year data really proved that because if you were flat last year, you beat the industry by 3%. And if you were up, you really did a fantastic job last year. This one, just looking at the biggest sectors in the industry, for most of my 30 years in staffing, it's industrial was number one, and then IT came on as number two, but now healthcare is number one. So healthcare is the biggest sector in the staffing industry, not by a lot, just by a little bit above industrial and IT. But you add up those three, and you can see 20, 40, 60, almost 70%. A little over 70% of the staffing industry is made up of these three sectors. Now, some of the fastest growing areas, things like education, skilled trades, I don't remember if they counted it as a subset of industrial, they gave it its own category, but some of the fastest growing areas are small segments, not as big, but where there are opportunities for growth. And of last year's fastest growing staffing firms, I was really surprised that half of them were in healthcare staffing. I would have thought with the challenges in healthcare, we wouldn't have seen that kind of recovery yet, but five out of the top 10 were in healthcare. We're also going to talk about some of the states where they were located, and there were some surprises there as well. But Brad already kind of alluded to the second bullet here. Most of the companies that are growing the fastest now do more than just staffing. It could be statement of work. It could be project solutions. They could have other ways they're sort of moving up the food chain to offer higher value services, higher margin services, but also taking on greater responsibilities than merely providing the workers to get things done. And there's the states. So the top 10 states for staffing growth, I won't read them to you there, but you can see all of them. Texas sort of dominated the list. I was surprised to see New Jersey and New York near the top of the list, especially since I'm from New York and growth is not something that we've been feeling in New York State. But according to SIA, they were in the top three fastest growing states. It was kind of interesting to me, as a lot of the states you see in the news, Texas, California, Michigan, all amongst the fastest growing for staffing. And pick your partisan politics, but it looks like it doesn't matter if it's red or blue. There's opportunities for growth, looking at the employers in those states and where staffing companies can work with them. All right, and the part of this talk that usually everybody wants to hear the most is what's going to happen this year. So, with the exception of clerical, which not IT, which AI is just eating up clerical jobs left and right, everything's up. Now, it's not get excited, explosive up, but it feels pretty good to see all pluses in the forecast for this year compared to what we've seen the last 2 years. And life sciences, engineering, education, those are sectors that are predicted to do even better. So I was really personally very pleased to see forecasts across the board for growth, and hopefully the reality will match the predictions. And somebody just asked if we have stats on the legal staffing side. Other than what's in here, we don't have anything specific to legal staffing. There may have been some breakout data in the presentations, and maybe we can take a look for you after this presentation over, see if SIA had anything that we reviewed that we didn't include here. But I don't think they broke it out to that level in the slides in the opening keynote. So if you're looking to make some changes this year, what were the recommendations of the SIA leaders? In industrial, it's looking at sectors inside industrial that are going to have outsized growth. Skilled trades, construction, and energy were their top 3 picks to grow. One that they predicted to decline that surprised me was semiconductor, because at least from the news I'm reading out of the AI industry, they're trying to do more migrating semiconductor manufacturing to the United States. So hopefully that will come true, because that should create a lot of jobs. IT, companies that are providing solutions. Staffing for coders. You watch the news and you watch what Claude Code can do in these AI tools. Cursor can create code. Despite the fact that we have massive productivity gains thanks to AI, we're seeing actually more, not less, demand for coders. And then we need the people to manage the projects, because now that we're building software in new ways with AI, we need new skills amongst project managers, how to run those teams, how to think through problem solving. Because I will tell you from our firsthand experience, building with AI is very different from building with traditional software development techniques. And then some other specific sectors, data, cloud architects, and cybersecurity are all forecasted to have outsized growth for 2026. In engineering, kind of goes with some of the industrial stuff, data centers, utilities for energy, power generation. So things that are going to, you can see how many things here are like second level effects or second order effects of the AI industry. So everything in engineering is second level to what AI is going to need. Healthcare. Locums has been the darling of the healthcare industry for the last 24 months, and it's still the strongest for growth in 2026. SIA said, but all areas are getting much more stabilized. So that volatility that we saw, where it shot up in 2020 to 2022 and collapsed in 23 and 24, at least should be more, not even flat, at least a positive trend for 2026. And the biggest opportunity, it's the third time we're going to say it, but is to think beyond staffing. And this is the data I was mentioning earlier. 30% of the workforce are people who work in contingent roles, but only 8% of those are agency workers. So 22% of the workforce are things like freelancers or platform workers, consultants, solutions providers. And if you are running a staffing company thinking, what are we going to do differently to drive growth? You might want to look at your clients and say, well, where are they using contingent work, contingent labor outside of what they buy from a staffing company? And where are there opportunities to help them manage those people, to provide workforce management services, to provide EOR solutions, to get into helping them more strategically manage HR or their recruitment process or business process outsourcing. Recruitment marketing is another one. Staffing companies are one step away from helping companies with recruiting across the board, not just to do the recruiting, but to use your expertise to help them figure out how to be better at recruiting. And then one you've heard from SIA for multiple years is workforce development and upskilling. There's a role for the staffing industry to play in getting workers ready for the jobs of, I was going to say tomorrow, but really it's the jobs of today, as we need a true AI first, AI powered workforce in many, many roles. All right. Let's see. Oh, I got another one. I thought this was going to Brad, but I got two in a row. Lucky me. All right. So the next session, the next keynote that I'll recap was the visionary leadership for 2026, leading the next era of staffing. And in this discussion, it was a really interesting keynote on it was on AI, but really it was about leadership. And what I really liked this first question the speaker asked. Basically, are you moving toward the future or is the future moving towards you? So he said most organizations, most leaders spend their time defending against what could go wrong in the future. We play defense. And what this gentleman said is that really the way to think about this is to play offense by defining what the future looks like. So as leaders, we're told to be visionary thinkers and to really paint a very clear picture of what our future might look like. Some people will say, create a 10-year vision. And if you can do that in the world of AI in this economy, bless you, I don't know how you do it. But one of my favorite models is a guy named Cameron Herold, and he wrote a book called Vivid Vision. And he really says, try to forecast 3 years out. 1 year is not far enough, but most people can't see past 3 years with any clarity. And what you want to do is define this 3-year vision and say, how do we think the world's going to change? And what will our company look like in that future world? And now, how do we build a plan for moving towards that vision as opposed to defending against what could go wrong? So we want to create an infinite loop of incremental improvements. This is the old adage of, get 1% better every day, and you're way more than 365% better at the end of a year. I do not really know how you get 1% better every day, but you certainly can say, hey, what's the next 1 or 5% improvement we can make in speed of service delivery, the quality of our talent recruiting, the communication we have with our clients and candidates, and then as soon as we have a plan to accomplish that, somebody's implementing that plan while the visionary leaders are coming up with the plan that will come after that. So you do have this reinforcement loop of the leaders, and leaders don't mean by job title, it means leaders by people who can think towards the future. The leaders are figuring out how we can change, and the team is then putting those changes into place while the leaders are working on the next level. And it makes a flywheel that makes the business go faster and faster. And the speaker said when they survey most businesses about their current efforts to define the future of work and how AI and things are going to change the world of work, the feedback they get is nothing. Most businesses, most of your clients are playing a waiting game, hoping that somebody will figure out how jobs are going to change and then we'll pivot. Well, really, it should be the staffing industry that's helping to lead that charge about figuring out how work will change in the future and partnering with employers to bring tomorrow's talent into those organizations. So, how do you create the future? So, most companies take a problem-solving approach. Let's identify the problems and fix them. And if I remember correctly, the speaker kind of gave the old buggy whip analogy that said if you ask people in the eras of horses how to solve the problem of transportation being too slow, they would have said, well, we need more buggy whips to make the horses go faster. They didn't see a future in which there would be an automobile. But future solving is identifying your desired or possible future and planning backwards. So essentially, what could be brainstorming, trying to do your best to forecast out the technology trends, the socioeconomic trends, your own company's desired future, and then work backwards. If we're going to be at this point in 3 years, well, where do we need to be next year? Where do we need to be next quarter? Where do we need to be next month? So we talked about having 4 levels to future solving. 1 is creating that vision. 2 is building the strategy, and it's a really overused word. true strategic thinking is about not what are we going to do, but it's the big picture how. I want to get from A to B. How do I get there? If I'm taking a trip across the United States, do I go by car, by train, by plane? Do I go a direct route? Do I go northern states? Do I go southern states? The strategy is what's the best path to get to that desired future. Then the systems design. Are our processes and people ready for this change? Uh, Going through a program at MIT called the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. And one of the things they teach us as entrepreneurs is every time your company doubles, half of your systems, half of your processes, and half of your people can't keep up. So you need to design the systems of tomorrow that enable your people to keep up. You need to retrain your workforce to keep up. And as you're solving for your future and your staffing business, you have to be thinking about how will we reinvent our systems, because the way we do service delivery in an AI-powered staffing industry is going to look very different than it has for the last 30 years. And the last one is just social economics. How is what's happening in the outside world, how people communicate, how they view the world, how they interact with one another, how is that going to impact your desired future state? For us in the staffing industry, that's mostly about the world of work. We saw, remote work become everybody in 2020, and now most businesses are sort of clawing it back and eliminating remote work. But 30% of the workforce is in some sort of contingent capacity. So, as an industry, what can we do to take advantage of that economic reality that one out of every three workers is somebody we could have an impact on as an industry? And right now, we're only 8%, not 30%. So, how can you be a visionary leader this year? One, stop watching all the news and all the hype. And I'm guilty as charged. I'm like a total AI information addict. But some of that noise can be very distracting and lead you to on a lot of wild goose chases. We don't want to be, for those who are fans of the movie Up, shouting the word squirrel out and chasing every shiny new thing. But we do need to be aware of the trends. Third time I'm going to say it, but start with a vision. We do a lot of marketing consulting, and we'll ask people about the vision of the future. We'll ask people about their goals for the next 12 months. And you would be blown away by the number of times there is no answer to the question, what do you want to be in 3 years? What do you need to accomplish next year? So you need to be able to put down in writing a very clear picture that you could describe to anybody of where we're going. What's the future we're going to create as an organization? And you want to be bold, but not so bold as to be completely unrealistic, bold and achievable. Then you want to make it visible. How do we literally help people see what the future looks like? Because you, as a visionary leader, may easily picture in your mind what tomorrow is going to look like. But then you need to define, well, what will that look like for our team? What has to be true in order for us to achieve our goal? And you work it backwards. Okay, for that to be true, what has to be true? And for that to be true, what has to be true? And you just keep working backward to what do we have to do right now? Honor your history, a physical, digital, social layer. Basically, these are the soft skills. These are what your company's already good at, your capabilities. It's your company, it's your mission, your vision, your values, your physical infrastructure, your technical capabilities. What do you have today that you can build upon? We don't want to just say throw everything out and start over, but we want to use that as the foundation for the future. Playing 4D chess. Most people think, how do I improve 10%? Not how do I improve 10x? There's a good book, 10x is easier than 2x. If you've never read it, go look at it, because that's how you take giant leaps. I think I saw Elon Musk saying, what's stopping you from achieving your 10-year goal in the next 6 months? For me, it was I didn't have a 10-year goal. So Elon runs companies that way, and you can see the results. Love him or hate him, you cannot deny what he has created, because he is an exponential thinker. Peter Diamandis is an exponential thinker. So follow people who think that way, and you get such great ideas. Create new value. So this is interesting in the second part of this sentence, addressable by humans and AI agents. So we need to think about what are our clients, what are employers going to need to get work done? Tomorrow's work, 2026 work, is going to be an AI human hybrid. Pretty soon, this year, for certain in 2027, it's going to be an AI agent human hybrid. So as staffing companies, what can we do to actually facilitate some of that agentic work delivery? Some of the big guys in the room at the executive forum were talking about selling AI agent services. And then you have to not just get buy-in, but enroll people in your vision, meaning they see their essential purpose, where they fit into your picture, the vision. They see where you're headed. And maybe if you use the example of rowing crew, an 8-man boat where everybody's rowing at a different time doesn't go anywhere. But an 8-man boat where everybody's rowing at the same time in sync flies along the water. And that's what you have to do, is you have to get your team pulling together just like that boat. All right, let us break out to the sessions. Brad, now it's you.
Thanks so much, David. Great information, and you teed this slide up very well in your last slide. The session I went to was the enterprise buyer, looking at their mindsets, their priorities, their strategies, and what's coming next. And I know a lot of our listeners here might not be selling into enterprise organizations, but I think it's important because often what we see impacting the enterprise buyer is soon to hit the mid-market and the small organizations. So I think it's important to know what's happening and what the large internationals are facing and dealing with contingent enterprise buyers so that we can prepare. And you've heard it a few times, but there's been a shift in workforce strategy. So contingent labor is now core to business strategy. More and more organizations are looking at it as a new, unique way not only to get work done, but to streamline costs, bring in talent needed that they were missing and skills needed that they were missing. So I think there's a big opportunity for us here. And when they're at the table and they're talking about overall business strategy, a blended workforce model is something that's on the top of procurement's mind. It's on the top of HR's mind. It's on the top of the CFO and the CEO. They're looking at a mix of full-time employees with contingent labor. And as David just mentioned, also a layer of AI and digital labor. So no longer are companies relying just on full-time hiring. They're looking at minimal full-time hires supported with contingent labor. And then they're looking for partners to come in and plan workforce and output with AI and digital labor included in that. So the staffing company is no longer just supplying that contingent labor. As David mentioned, maybe it's AI agents or layering on technology to 2x, 5x, 10x the output of their contingent labor workforce. So as small to medium-sized staffing companies, we need to think about how we can upskill, train, and encourage our contingent labor to embrace AI, embrace the digital labor so that we can 5x, 10x output and provide more value to the end buyer. Sometimes it might mean less headcount, higher margins. Sometimes it actually might lead to higher headcount because if you can pair and scale contingent labor with digital labor, with AI, and 10x the output, you can place a lot more people. So for companies that ignore it, it's a threat. For companies that embrace it, huge opportunity. And I'll leave you with this. And one of the key takeaways here from this entire panel is that these buyers don't want to buy talent anymore. That's not what they're buying. They are choosing a staffing agency because that staffing agency is a partner with them that redesigns how work gets done. And they're looking for a partner that might come in and say, hey, we can streamline your headcount by pairing our contingent workforce with digital AI labor and produce better output, save you costs, and then the staffing company can charge a higher multiple as well. David, I'll kick it back over to
All
you.
right, back to me already. Boy, that was too quick. All right, so I think we should be playing the AI drinking game during this presentation because we're going to cover so many that discuss it. But 93% of staffing leaders are investing in AI. So if you're in the 7% that doesn't have an AI plan, you need to go out and look at it or you will get left behind. It's not a nice to have. It's going to be a must to have in order to be financially competitive in the years to come. Recruiters, not a big surprise here. Most common uses of AI is candidate discovery, getting an insight on candidate skills, accelerating the recruiting process so we can eliminate a lot of the mundane tasks that are very labor intensive, things like, hey, doing all the candidate outreach, scheduling, doing initial interviews, and a lot of the candidate qualification and vetting. And then just streamlining the interview process itself are the most common uses of AI in recruiting. One of the speakers laid out an AI buyer's guide that I liked, and it's kind of this six-step process. So number one, align the outcomes. What does success look like if we're going to implement AI? Then partner with the stakeholders inside the organization, the senior executives, recruiting leaders. If you're a bigger organization, you have a separate IT and legal department, but we need all the stakeholders to agree on what we're trying to accomplish and what are the ground rules for playing. We have to identify where IT and AI add value. So is it about increasing efficiency? Is it about improving quality? Is it about speed, increasing service delivery? Maybe it's about all of those things, but we want to use the right AI, the right IT tools in the right place. And it's about developing the right list of questions for the vendors. This is actually a really good AI use case to go help you figure out what you need to grill your vendors on. How does the product work? How is it governed to ensure that it's providing quality, reliable data? What's the product roadmap? And if somebody said, if the company you're talking to doesn't have a clear roadmap of the changes they're going to be implementing, run away because AI is changing so fast that any AI technology vendor without a roadmap doesn't know what they're doing. Beware of risks and legal regulations. There were a couple of examples of companies that have been sued because of bias in hiring. A lot of staffing companies are saying, hey, because of this, I shouldn't do it at all. No, it's more a matter of if we do this, where do we use it and how do we use it to minimize risk? Start with things that have no risk in the hiring process. Could be as simple as scheduling. There's no risk. Then look to vendors that can validate, hey, we're not adding more bias into your hiring process. We're just adding speed and quality. And the last bullet's the most important. AI adoption inside your company is not about technology, it's about change management. That is the biggest barrier to success is getting everyone to adopt and maximize the use of the platforms you bring in. All right, Brad, back to you.
Sounds good. This was a nice session, panel discussion where different staffing leaders and automation platform leaders talked about how to leverage those tools to drive revenue and in sales. So all three panelists suggested and looked at AI chatbots to act as your initial sales development rep. Going through and answering basic questions, making it simple and easy to engage with your website, engage with your organization, get real-time answers, get real-time feedback. That's what's winning today. And that's how buyers have shifted. They no longer want to pick up the phone and talk directly with a sales rep for basic questions. They don't want to be sold to. They want to educate themselves beforehand. And that's where the second bullet really comes into play is companies need to invest in buyer enablement. When I talk about buyer enablement, it's not sales collateral, it's not sales messaging. It's literally buyer education. It's educating the buyer, your prospect, on the value that they're going to get from the services that you offer and educating them on the difference in your services versus others. It's being honest, it's being transparent, it's knowing where you play, what you're great at, what your organization truly excels at, and then just as importantly, what your organization doesn't do great. So be honest and be transparent. Share those things in company comparisons, service overviews, case stories. You want to do everything possible to showcase the value that your staffing company offers before a prospect even talks with you. And I'll get into this a little bit more in a future session. And then all three panelists mentioned how important real time engagement is. It's the expectation right now. So you can't get a lead inquiry, sit on it for a day, and follow up with them in a day or two. That need has already been filled. So the big players are looking at ways that they can get leads, messages, inquiries to the individual office and the individual salesperson as quickly as possible. There's same day response requirements, and in many cases, they want people being reached out to within an hour or two, no more than that, because you're losing the business. And they summarized and wrapped the relationship between marketing and sales really as a relay race. So, marketing is running the first part of that relay race. It's warming the lead. It's creating buyer enablement and education for those buyers so that when somebody does flow down to the sales side, sales can close the lead. The buyer's been educated already. They understand and have answered most of their questions. We've got them 80% of the way there. Sales is closing the deal from there. And then again, speed and automation are your competitive advantage. The person that gets back to them first with a great value, great options, is going to win. All right, Susan, I believe you are up.
Finally, guys. All right. So the focus of this panel was on the shift in healthcare staffing. And as you know from being in the industry, healthcare staffing has been through the ringer for the last few years. There's a significant supply and demand imbalance that's only going to get worse. There's approximately 300,000 unfilled healthcare jobs versus about 150,000 new nurse graduates each year. Math is not my strong suit, and I can even figure out that that's not sustainable. Some staffing companies are shifting from acute care to non-acute, such as ambulatory and home health. And there's also identified a large opportunity for staffing companies with school districts, particularly for behavioral health. But you really need to identify that the recruiting and sales approach in this market needs to be completely different. From a technology and automation standpoint, like other industry sectors, the adoption of AI, take a drink, and automation is a must to fill and reduce operating costs. But the human connection is even more important in healthcare vertical due to the high emotion or crisis situations often present. Several panelists said their approach to AI was top-down governance with bottoms-up innovation. One of the panelists said they put together an AI innovations team made up of team members from each function who were nominated by their peers. And then the team members experiment with various AI tools and then communicate the productivity enhancements and successes with leadership for consideration of company-wide implementation. And I love that approach. Some predictions and tips they had. One panelist emphasized the need to take a more data-driven approach, emphasizing cost to vacancy and cost to hire. They also felt there's an increasing demand for more transparency around fill rate, time to fill, and completion rates, and that clients are coming to expect this as just a standard. Also, AI is going to allow for the lowering of credentialing requirements, which I thought was interesting. And based on this supply and demand shift, it's going to have to lower because we can't keep up. And there's also an active initiative right now to look at a change in visa requirements to help with the shortage of healthcare professionals in the US. What's different now from 18 years ago when healthcare staffing was all about putting a person boots on the ground in a location is the industry is moving toward putting together a complete care team. And now back to you, Brad.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I had the um, honor of facilitating a network, one of the networking roundtables. So it's an hour-long session, and it's broken up into two halves. So you go around and choose the topic that you're interested in. My topic was differentiation, so how the best staffing firms command premium pricing. And each roundtable attendee, it's an open dialogue, open discussion. And what's interesting is my two tables, the first table and the second table, were extremely different. The first table, when I asked what makes your staffing company unique, we went around the table, and there was a variation of service and providing better service, custom tailored service, white glove service. Everybody at the first table mentioned that. And they were all struggling and they were all dealing with low margin work because they were stuck in this sea of sameness. So there was no real differentiation. They weren't doing buyer enablement ahead of time. People coming into them were shopping based just on price. There was no choosing of the right clients. These companies all were just happy to get a job order. So they were struggling heavily with premium pricing. And the second table was really interesting because as I went around the table, there were so many different points of differentiation. One was going into it with statement of work arrangements. They were not dealing with commodity pricing. They were selling high level solutions and consulting. Another was selling light industrial staffing services, but they weren't going in selling that. Instead, they were repositioning it as a workforce and production stabilization partner. So they went in with that service and then they filled light industrial positions afterwards. So went in with a very high value, high margin service, and were not seen as a general staffing agency. Another would go into MSP and VMS situations and do everything possible to become a member of their advisory panel. And by doing that, they were able to gain visibility. So, the real takeaway here is to think about how you can differentiate yourself before a sales call even happens. Don't be afraid to say no to the wrong clients and key in on who really is the right client. And then think about how you can repackage your services to sell higher margin solutions and solutions to problems like coming in as a workforce stabilization partner. All right. The next session was a great one led by Butler Street. And this was all about becoming trusted. So instead of being a transactional partner, how staffing firms can really sell more and sell smarter and be seen as advisors. And the team at Butler Street talked about the sales shift. We've historically, for the decade before COVID, were order takers. We were getting an order and we were filling those quickly. We need to shift now and become advisors. As I mentioned earlier, most companies are no longer looking to place an order. They're no longer looking for just people. They're looking for smarter and better ways to get the work done. And they need an advisor to help them do that. Your teams can do that. But most sales teams are trained to react and not lead. Most of the sales activities, in fact, they mentioned 70% of a salesperson's time is spent on non-selling activities. So pair digital agents with your sales team to make them more impactful. And what was missing, they identified, was thought leadership. We're not doing a great job of arming our teams and our prospects with good, high quality thought leadership. Many salespeople didn't have a true understanding of business problems and how to go about solving those and matching a solution to an actual business problem. And then a lot of salespeople were stuck in that order taker mentality. They didn't think about how to create demand. They didn't think about how to approach talent with AI and with digital labor to decrease or streamline headcount and drive up productivity. So, as sales leaders, we need to adapt. We need to stop measuring and rewarding transactional metrics. So, most companies are looking at activities like calls, emails, outreach, cold calls. Instead, we need to value quality interactions. So, look at quality connects, quality conversations, meetings, proposals that actually align with our target ICPs, not just a job order that we're not going to be able to fill. And then they emphasize that one-time trainings don't work. All too often, they see staffing companies go in and bring in a trainer for a one-time session. We need frequent role playing, and we need to leverage AI and training models to help support that. All right, Susan.
All right, thanks, Brad. Well, I think the next three sessions are me, which makes me kind of sad because I like channeling my inner news reporter and saying things like, back to you, Brad. But this one was a session on light industrial staffing. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go to this because I went to the one last year and it was kind of depressing. Good news, it wasn't this year. There seems to be light here for light industrial, no pun intended. This was a panel discussion, and all the panelists agreed that light industrial is starting to finally see some stabilization after years of decline. And one panelist said that since the beginning of the year, they've seen double-digit growth year over year, which hasn't happened in quite a while. Growth trends right now are regional, with Southeast leading with over 20% increases. Northeast is showing modest growth, with the West Coast and Midwest remaining relatively flat. One panelist in the 3PL space said that some of their clients are switching back to temporary hires from hiring full-time, both because of the flexibility and also because, and I found this very interesting, their clients are dictating the percentage of temporary employees versus permanent employees that they want. Buyers have more options now than ever before. Statement of work, MSP, gig economy, and anyone can have access, anyone has access to these tools, but there are opportunities. So as an industry, we need to get back to selling our value prop and defend our margins by focusing on service quality and education. One panelist shared that they sell on compliance and risk management. Every on-site account they do twice daily safety walks, and their clients and employees love it. And they've seen improved employee retention at these accounts that they're attributing to that. Also, employees are looking for stability. One of the panelists said that every year they survey thousands of employees, and this was the first year in a very long time that pay wasn't the top reason for accepting or staying at a job. It was stability. So, as further proof of this, they also asked about gig work, and this year there was a 19% reduction in those who said they were interested. Next, find creative ways to increase your candidate pool. A previously overlooked pool of talent is now easier to manage, and that's those who can't work an 8-hour shift. With the right technology, you can manage these employees' availability and opportunities better than previously. It builds employee loyalty because it opens up work that normally they wouldn't have been exposed to. And also cited partnerships with trade schools and workforce development programs are also increasing access to skilled labor. So some advice from the panelists: high tech and high touch, face the future with confidence, and invest in technology and your people. Spend time with your frontline staff. These are the most important people in your company. Find out their problems and solve those problems, not what you think the problems are. And finally, don't overcomplicate a frontline desk process by overteching. It's about speed and quality. Look to the technology, but make sure the technology is solving the real problem. We definitely have a theme there. So the next session is competing in a $10.2 trillion workforce solutions ecosystem. This session was made up of 3 SIA staff members. So trends and challenges that they cited. The workforce solutions ecosystem is valued at $10.2 trillion, with statement of work spend surpassing independent contractors for the first time ever. Enterprise buyers, they defined as 1,000 plus employees, face challenges such as low NPS scores for many providers, program adoption difficulties due to operating in silos, and rising compliance demands. And as Brad had mentioned, with the trends in enterprise buyers, we're going to see, moving toward our target. Staffing companies face growing competition from consulting firms, talent platforms, and enterprise direct sourcing initiatives, but there are many opportunities for growth. So statement of work services, direct sourcing models, recruit, train, deploy programs, EOR services, and outplacement services, which obviously are cyclical depending on market. Failure to diversify and adapt to changing client needs means risk of losing relevance and market share. But expansion into new service lines comes with significant investment, and you need to keep that in mind. And it also needs a clear value proposition, different from traditional staffing and sales teams. The sales teams need to become trusted advisors. And then Peter made the comment that your delighters today become your must-haves of tomorrow, which I couldn't agree with more. And the next session was Women in Staffing Leadership Masterclass. This session was unique in that it wasn't a panel or one presenter. Each of the women did a TED Talk style masterclass on a specific topic. So Robin talked about executive selection and readiness. Jeanette spoke about the pressure of high profile leadership. Bess was on insights for women business owners, and Rona's topic was confidence, networking, and longevity. So, one um, thing that they cited was women's representation in leadership roles peaked at 34.8% in 2022, but has declined to 31.6%. And globally, women hold less than two-thirds of legal rights compared to men, with only 4% living in countries offering full equality, which I thought that was an amazing statistic, not amazing in a good way. Some of my favorite pieces of advice that was given throughout their talks was develop your brand, online and professional. Think about what your platform is. Speak, present, write, get interviewed for articles, create content, and post. Be intentional about building your connections. And hone your hiring skills. Make that your top priority so you can surround yourself with excellent people. Build what Jeanette called a truth loop, both within your company and outside of it. Find people who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. And there's isolation and ownership. So make sure you learn what you can share with your team and what you can't share with your team. And as a result, make sure you have a peer group or groups that you can talk to. And you need to protect yourself, mental and physical health, protect your sleep, and protect your personal relationships. Establish the mindset of revenue with intention. Not all revenue is good revenue, and this was stated earlier. Good revenue is the right client and the right terms. Anytime you move from your core, you lose time and money. And finally, seek out people who challenge and inspire you. Find your people and make sure they're showing up for you and you're showing up for them. And now I'll pass it to David.
As back to me for the last two sessions, actually one session, there was a set of three presenters who talked about executive perspectives, and I'm going to be very blunt and transparent. There was an interesting presentation by a lady who was head of a law firm, and then I asked at the end who understood what her advice was, and all three of us said, yeah, I didn't get it. So I'm not going to present her presentation because I can't really share anything justice, but I can share the other two. So one was Mike Jackatote at Butler Street, and I really liked his methodology here. You've heard me say it, you heard Brad say it, you heard Susan say it. AI is just not, isn't just a tool to be used, it's a form of labor that has to be a part of your workforce. Mike said the biggest competitor in staffing is not another staffing firm, but it's a staffing company with a massive digital workforce running 24/7. If your competitors aren't there today, they will be there sometime this year and for sure by next year. So you need to make sure you're there also. And then if you're going to think about how to turn AI into EBITDA, Mike said there are five decisions that you need to make. Number one, which roles in your business really drive profits? There's probably a top 3 to 5 workflows, or you can use the 80/20 rule, the ones that really drive the most impact on your bottom line. Redesigning the roles. The human beings are the orchestrators. They determine what gets done and how it gets done, but the AI itself does the work. The human owns the result. You don't just let the AI take over and be done. Somebody's got to be checking it, make sure it's good. You need governance that accelerates. So you have to know what is the AI allowed to touch, the data, what actions is the AI allowed to take and what isn't, and where do we need human approvals in the system. We want to measure the outcomes. If we tried to drive revenue, did we? If we're trying to get faster, how fast did we get? If we tried to improve productivity, so how much more gross margin is each recruiter generating? And ultimately, did implementing this technology impact our earnings or our labor efficiency ratio? Something that shows, hey, we're getting more profitable by integrating AI as a digital worker into our organization. And Mike's final point was about deploying digital staffing, I'm calling it AI there, with human accountability. So AI can be your researcher, your writer, your data manager. It can be doing interviews. It can be arranging follow-up. It can be handling communication. But again, the AI isn't responsible for what happens at the end of the day. Someone on your team must be responsible. So I really like that five-part framework for maximizing the value of AI investments. And then the last session we're going to talk about, which one I really liked, I'm glad we kind of have this one last. It was Jeff Bowling talking about his experience at the Delta companies driving amazing growth. So he showed that his business was kind of blowing the doors off growth from 2005 to 2013, 34% compound growth, 14 million to 79 million. They were just killing it. Like we've got 100 million clearly in our sights. And then in 2014, the revenues declined. They fell back to 77 million. And as Jeff wrote it literally on screen and said out loud, that sucked. So Jeff said, what are we going to do to get back on track? And he said, we're going to set a really bold goal. We're going to hit that $100 million and we're going to do it not at 34% compound annual growth. We're going to do it next year. We're going to go from 77 to 100 million. And he talked about what he did to make that happen. First thing is they set a bold goal, not only just 100 million, but $10 million in EBITDA. Then they created a system for success. First, it was a leadership team. And he said they fought like cats and dogs about what that vision of the future would look like. And they said, we didn't leave our executive team room until we all were enrolled in that vision. You remember that definition from earlier. They bought into the vision and then they saw what their role was in making it happen. They created this grand theme. They called it EPIC that gave the outcome an identity so everybody could see what it meant. They made it visual. You may recall this parallels what we heard earlier. They did a bottom-up budgeting. So every single person, top to bottom, knew what they had to accomplish in the next 12 months to achieve their goals. They got people at all levels involved in the solutions. They called them workup sessions. They repeatedly celebrated their milestone successes along the way, and then they acknowledged and addressed the gaps. So they were looking at how are we doing month in and month out. And they had a systematic approach to accountability. Everybody had clear expectations. They said they had whiteboards all over the place with data so people could see how they were doing. They constantly discussed their performance. And then, probably most importantly, they followed up with people to make sure if something was off track, they got back on track. And no surprise, Jeff wouldn't have been presenting if they didn't achieve the goal, but they didn't. They got to 96 million. And they had this amazing vacation plan for their team if they were successful, but they were short. And then they looked at the EBITDA. And instead of getting 10, they got 11.4 million. And the gap, the reason they were even more profitable than they forecast was because they got everybody involved. And it was the back office team that found a ton of efficiencies that drew profitability at higher levels that enabled them to achieve their goals. So I loved everything about this formula. You heard the lessons from a keynote speaker at the beginning of today's webinar. Now you're hearing the lessons from somebody who put it into action that worked to drive incredible results. All right, guys, let's wrap it up. Let's bring home our lessons learned in our last minute. I will go quickly. My lessons. Hey, great. We're back to modest growth. But if you're going to be successful this year, you got to get in front of it. Be smarter, bolder, more impactful in your marketing, your sales, integrating technology, AI into your operations. Somebody said at the conference that I loved it, if not you, then who will create your future? Yes, AI feels overwhelming, but you're not falling behind. Most companies are still in evaluation mode. Just now, get it into service delivery. Use it strategically to deliver faster, improve quality, increase efficiency. And personal win, we launched our AI marketing operating system, our AI marketing assistant, Rogue IQ. And I said jaw dropping. That's not hyperbole. I literally, the first demo I did, I watched a former client of ours and his daughter who were at the conference doing the demo. and literally their mouth opened as they looked at what we were doing. And it was so fun to be there representing a new technology, a new way of working, and bringing new value to our clients. The reactions for us and our team were absolutely priceless. Brad.
Yeah, my takeaways were staffing is shifting from talent supply to workforce solutions. I mentioned it a lot of times, but the winning firms are combining talent, technology, and that digital labor. They're looking at how AI can 10x the productivity of the people that they do put in place. And if your service is just placing people, you're a commodity. You're dealing with price consolidation. The winners are going to be transformational, not transactional. So employers want partners. You have to reduce friction. You have to bring good insights, and you have to tie everything that you're doing back to business outcomes to prove value. You have to move to being a problem solver. And then the last bullet is speed and AI are going to define the next era. It's digital labor. It's reshaping your delivery models. It's being faster, smarter, and more profitable. Those companies are going to win. And I have a great example of this, unintentional. We got our booth shipment and our big 50-inch TV screen monitor was cracked. And what the heck were we going to do? We needed work done. We needed to get a replacement there. And we went on Uber Eats. And David, if you want to go to the next slide, we ordered a TV, a new 50-inch screen that was delivered, ironically enough, in a convertible within probably 37 minutes from when I hit the button on Uber Eats to when I was carrying that TV back into the expo hall. It was quick, it was simple, it was easy. They changed how got done, and they solved a very specific and immediate problem for us. We can do the same. And Susan.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, when Brad was on the phone with the Uber Eats driver, he said, I'm a couple minutes away. You can't miss me. And when he pulled up, we could see why. It was quite the sight. So my takeaways, and it's always so hard to find just a few, but change is everywhere. Clients' needs and expectations are evolving. The industry needs to evolve with it if we're going to stay relevant. And as you've heard multiple times during this session, clients are looking for staffing companies that can do more than put butts in seats. They're looking for strategic workforce advisors. Next, AI fatigue is real. 23 AI vendors at the Executive Forum. We walked around and counted them all also. So make sure you're implementing AI to solve a specific problem or inefficiency, not implementing it just because you feel it's something that you're supposed to be doing. And finally, I have a tradition of one of my takeaways is always about food. So you can't go to Austin without eating barbecue at Terry Black's. That's the right name of the restaurant, right, David?
That was it.
Okay. So keeping Austin weird is they're saying, and only in Austin is a Michelin restaurant where you can eat at picnic tables after standing in line to get your food served to you on a tray. But it was amazing. All right, I think it's to you, David.
All right, let's wrap it up. We are a couple minutes past the hour. Actually, for an executive forum recap, I think that was the fastest we've ever had one go. So for everybody, thank you for joining us for the session. If you need to catch up, as always, recordings are at lunchwithhaley.com, so you can check them out there. Wanted to plug, we had a lot of people at the show come up to us and say, hey, I just want to thank you for the content that you guys share on your podcast. So if you don't listen to Secrets of Staffing Success and our Insights and Take the Stage shows, if you've not heard Brad Biley talk to some of the industry's leading influencers, vendors, and implementers, tune in, download. You are going to love the show. It is some of the best advice you can get anywhere in the staffing industry to improve your operations. And on my end, I do most of the writing for our weekly newsletter. So if you want your Saturday mornings to have a little learning filled, sign up for Smart Ideas Weekly. You can find it on our website because you may not have time to get your phones out and take a picture of this because we're already over time. But if you go to haleymarketing.com, you'll find it right on the bottom of the homepage. And last up for today, we got two upcoming webinars in April and May. First one is a product demo, which we haven't done in a bit, but we mentioned Rogue IQ. So if you want to see what AI can look like in your marketing, if you want to see how to really transform how you do your marketing, you can come join the Rogue Rebellion on April 21st, 2 o'clock. We're going to take you through our new technology. And then next month in early May, we're going to take a look at how to stay top of mind. You may have heard us say on previous webinars that the staffing sales cycle is up to 72 touch points. So we're going to talk about how to stay top of mind and drive sales through branded content. All right, thank you for putting up with us for a bonus 5 minutes. Hope that you took home some great value from this year's Executive Forum recap. And we all look forward to seeing you on the next Lunch with Haley event. Thanks so much for joining us today. And thank you, Brad, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye.
everyone.